So thank you all so much for joining us for a presentation on guiding diners towards plant-rich dishes. I am really delighted to have two great speakers to present with us today. Sophie Attwood is the Senior Behavioral Scientist at the Better Buying Lab, which is a program within the World Resources Institute. Gavrieli is a research global program manager for Compass, working on the food program in the Google account. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sophie to start the presentation. Thanks, Sophie.
Hi, Sharon, and hello to everyone listening. Presenting today with Anna on some of our applied research in which we're looking at applying insights and methods from behavioural science to try to understand some good ways to guide diners towards more plant-rich dishes when eating out and away from meat-heavy dishes. And if we can, there we go. And a bit of background on why we're really interested in this question. So the graph here shows the relative environmental impact of some different types of food. And what I want to draw your attention to here is the difference between the bars, the red bars on the right and the green bars. So these red bars represent the relative greenhouse gas emissions associated with production of 1 gram of protein of popular meat products. And on the left-hand side, we have the equivalent for popular common plant-based products like peas, beans, and legumes. And what you can see really clearly from this graph is that beef is associated with a far higher greenhouse gas emission footprint than common plant-based sources of protein. So if you actually compare beef to beans in that graph, we have a 20 times greater emissions produced per gram of protein for the beef, which basically makes beef and other ruminant meat a really inefficient food source from an environmental perspective to feed a growing population. And that kind of means if we want to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is to keep global temperature rises within a safe operating space of around 1.5 degrees Celsius for above where we are now, we really need a rapid and significant reduction in the amount of beef that people are eating. And that's especially true of high consuming countries like the US or Europe, for example. So it's pretty clear now the environmental impact of our diets is a huge problem. And then this message is one that's increasingly being communicated to consumers in the media. Yet when we ask consumers to rank the relative environmental impact of their own food choices, they tend to rank environmental concerns as far lower than other slightly more immediate purchase drivers like price or taste. And this is shown quite clearly on this graph. So even customers that do prioritise environment far higher up the list, we often find this doesn't necessarily translate into more sustainable food choices. We can move on. So as a behavioural scientist, it's my job to try to understand why and how people do what they do in terms of decision making. And to answer this question, we can use lots of different models. And one of the models we commonly use, sorry, I've got quite bad cough. One of the models we commonly use is a two-system model of decision-making, and that's outlined here. And what this model basically states is that we have two distinct decision-making systems in the brain, system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is shown here on the left, it's in the purple. And this is our default decision-making system. It's the one in the brain that's always on. It's fast and automatic, and it's basically geared towards efficiency. So it helps us make decisions very quickly and easily without us having to think through every single decision that we make in quite a kind of onerous way. So it helps us operate rapidly in the environment. On the right-hand side, we have system 2. It's our more conscious, kind of engaged decision-making system. And we use this when we have to make a more deliberate choice. So it's a lot more accurate, the decisions that you make using the system, but it requires quite a lot of energy and attention, which means we don't tend to engage it very often unless we have the kind of spare capability to do so. So the energy and the attention, for example. So when it comes to a decision like what should I eat for lunch, that's typically a system 1 decision. It's quite quick, it's easy, it's automatic. And it's not something that we tend to recruit system 2 to weigh in on, for example. So we don't tend to tip into thinking about stats, facts and figures on climate change when we're thinking about what to eat. It just doesn't really happen. So this model in mind, there's some quite big implications for what we want to do if we'd like to influence consumer decision making. And in 2019, what we did at WRI was we actually took on the challenge of creating a guide for use in food service. And the point of this guide was to summarize the full range of different behavior change strategies that you can use to target both System 1 and System 2 in food service settings. And what we were trying to do with these strategies was influence consumers to choose more plant-based products when they're eating out. And we involved quite a long process to get to the results of this guide, so it's quite robust. We started with a scientific literature review where we took about 4,000 papers from the research literature, and we combed through these to get the most relevant, and we pulled out examples of what these papers had tested to see if that would influence consumer behaviour. Once we had that list, we also went out to quite a large group of industry experts who work in the area of promoting food, and we asked them some insights into the different techniques that they tend to use in their own operation, what they found has worked. And then once we'd done this, we compiled all these techniques together into a long list, and we took that list out to an industry sample, and we asked that sample to score the different techniques according to two key criteria, which were how impactful that they thought each technique was and how feasible they thought that technique was to do in practice. And if we move on to the next slide, if possible. Here we go. So here's a summary of the different list of techniques. I noticed there's a question saying, do we have access to the slides? If you're interested in this content, the guide itself is actually published on WRI's website under the Better Buying Lab, and it's open access, completely free to access. So all this content's available for you to have a look at if you'd like to see in more detail what I'm discussing here. So at the end of our process, we had 57 influence strategies in total, and we clustered these according to 5 key categories, which we call the 5P framework, and that discusses the different target of the intervention. So 1P is people, and that's talking about the staff in a food service operation. We have a P, product, which is talking about the food served itself. And on this graph is actually the sample's rankings of impact against feasibility. And the really interesting thing of this graph is the top right-hand quadrant that's coloured in slightly darker colour here. These are the top 23 techniques that the sample overall rated as above average in terms of feasibility and impact. So this was the best of the bunch. And if you move on to the next slide, the 23 are listed in more detail here. So as mentioned, and thank you for whoever's posted that in the group, the 23 techniques are laid out in quite a lot of detail in the guide. Each one has its own page, and on that page we present case study example, a bit more detail about kind of how and why each one works. So that guide's published, it's out there and available, the research has been done. What we're doing now is we're trying to take this insight off the pages of the playbook and actually get it into restaurants so it can be used to influence diners' choices in real time. And the way we're doing that at the Better Buying Lab is we've actually set up a virtual workshop. And what we do in this workshop is we start with each food operation that we work with. We give them an audit questionnaire where they can go and have a look at what they're currently doing in the context of the 57 techniques in the playbook, find out of the list which techniques are likely to be most impactful for their own setting. And then we work with them to build a personalised behaviour change strategy that's suitable for their organisation. And what I want to do now is hand over to Anna, who works for Compass at Google, who's going to talk you through some examples of how we've worked with the team at Google to try to encourage more plant-based foods to be consumed by Google staff. So thanks.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. We know that sustainable food choices are very high in the agenda of many organizations, and this includes Compass and Google. So the focus of my presentation today is how we bring sustainable food choices to operation by activating the playbook Sophie just introduced in the Google environment. Shifting diners to plant-rich options is central to our goals, and the promotion of food sustainability and wellness for the guests that dine in the cafes Compass operates at Google is core to our company mission and the Google Food Program goals. And our food service operators are pioneers in promoting sustainable food choices, and we support them with easy-to-implement strategies and tools that allow them to bring sustainable food choices to life in a consistent way. The Playbook is a great resource to achieve our goal. It provides us with guidance about what strategies are successful to implement in operations. It offers 5 key categories to organize our work and 23 strategies that we can use. And Sophie very nicely described. So in order to deliver a delicious, balanced, plan-forward menu and nudge our guests to sustainable food choices, we use the Playbook by combining different strategies for the different outcomes we want to achieve. And in order to make it easy for our culinarians to implement these strategies in a consistent way, we use our research program approach for doing research and bringing validated strategies to program, in our case, the Playbook strategies. And what we typically do is that we create blueprints and tools to support and guide our operators, but before deploying them across the entire program, we first test them as prototypes for their effectiveness. And if effective, then we scale across the different sites and geographies. And some examples of these blueprints and tools include, but are not limited to, planograms, workshops, and training tools. And at the next part of my presentation, I will give you 3 examples on how we use these tools to scale Playbook strategies across the Food at Google program. So the first example is on the Playbook strategy on using language to entice plant-rich choices. In order to guide our culinarians on how to create appealing dish names for plant-rich dishes, we use a creative workshop built by the Better Buying Lab. And this workshop teaches what are the key elements to create successful, appealing names. As you can see in the slide, these include emphasizing the dish's familiarity with other popular for meat lovers dishes, like cauliflower steak or popcorn chicken. Emphasizing what is the dish made from, so what are the unique ingredients of the dish? Where is it from? What is its provenance, or the cultural origin of the dish? What is it like? What is the look and feel? What is the taste? What is the eating experience? And how is it made? What is the cooking method? And on the right side of the slide, you can see an example of how we created an appealing name for the bean and veggie stew that became French slow-cooked mushroom and beans cassoulet. And by emphasizing the origin, cooking method, and making stew sound more exciting, we managed to increase the take of this dish by 66%. My next example is on salads. So we know that salads are a great way to get people to have a plant-rich meal. However, many people are concerned a salad won't satisfy them. So we build on our guests' beliefs what is a healthy and satisfying meal, as you can see in the slide quotes. I try to default to vegetables and some kind of protein. I try to avoid grains and carbs. To me, healthy means nothing processed, no unhealthy carbs, pure meat. So based on these insights, we develop an approach for our salad station that combines multiple strategies from the Playbook to increase the success of delivering salads that satisfies our guests' needs. And some of these strategies include that we design the cafes so the salad station is visible when someone enters the space. Usually, it is the first station you see when you enter the cafe, and it is always on a high traffic area. Another thing that we do is that we make sure that we offer a higher proportion of plant-rich choices compared to animal choices. And we also offer the ability for our guests to customize their salads. We also know that people fill most of their plate with the first 3 items they see. The salad station layout is designed in order to nudge guests to take more salad by offering the plant-rich choices first and the animal choices as the last items at the salad station. And we train our cafe teams on how to lay out the salad station in terms of product mix, order, and merchandising using manager guides and planograms, as you can see in the photos of this slide. And the last example is on the playbook strategy on training our culinarians on how to cook and prepare plant-rich dishes. We have developed SEED, which stands for Skills, Enrichment, Evolution, and Development, and is a Compass plant-forward culinary skill-building program. Over the past 2 years, our London team has successfully reduced meat and poultry purchases. As you can see in the slide, they managed to reduce beef by 59%, pork by 67%, and poultry by 11%. And we used many strategies to achieve these, but key was training the team via SEED on preparing and cooking craveable plant-rich dishes in a consistent way. Google is now partnering with the CIA on the Plant Forward Certificate Initiative to take the PFCI training to the next level and open it out to more groups. And we will continue partnering with the Better Buying Lab on best ways to leverage the playbook strategies to shift diets to more sustainable food choices, either through research or prototyping tools. Thank you, and we can now open it to Q&A.